Speaking of impacting aviation, we're going to introduce Gary Reeves. Gary, you have become Mr. GPS.
The guy in the pink shirt?
Well,
and I actually brought one.
That too. It was funny, we got two people who are particularly recognizable, with Andrew Barker with his little cowboy hat, right. And then we go, yeah, and then there's Gary in the pink shirt. So when you're inbound to be a guest, we can see all the way down the hall. Yep, there he is. He's on his way. So it worked out pretty well.
How you been, man? Good to see
Doing
you
well.
again.
Just busier and on one-arm paper hanger and trying to get ready for Sun and Fun and Friedrichshafen and everything else. It's insane, but
I think you're the only guy that's busier than I am.
That's trouble. That's real trouble. Before we get into some of your other activities, let's talk about a project you had recently with the U.S. Coast Guard.
Yeah, it's I've just had a spectacular life. I've always been well known as the expert to teach GPS, autopilots, glass panels. The Garmin panels are so beautiful, and the Avidyne and Genesis stuff. And I've been able to go all over the world and do that, but I've started doing some really large fleets. The U.S. Coast Guard shut down the Aviation Training Center, the National Aviation Training Center in Mobile, Alabama, for one day to have me come in and be the primary speaker. I got to train over 250 people how to use an amazing, it's called the Collins or Honeywell Common Avionics something structure, where there's all these bits of Honeywell King Collins stuff, Honeywell King stuff put in the panel, and they have DME-based RNAV with TACAN, ADF, and a non-WAS GPS. And everyone's like, well, why would the Coast Guard hire you? Well, the Coast Guard's unlike every military branch. I actually got to train a light attack Marine helicopter squadron before, but the interesting thing about the Coast Guard is they don't land at military bases. They mostly operate in the civilian national airspace. And they really needed help, like, well, what procedures can we do and what's the best way to file? And it was such an honor and such a kick. And that was amazing. And in 3 days, I'm actually going down to Houston to train the Houston Police Department Air Support Division. So I've gotten these really cool
fun gigs.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That does sound like fun. So what have you been doing to this point? We talked to you last year, a lot of activities and so forth. What's been filling your roster lately?
A lot of cool fleet training deals. But I'm really focused, particularly at this show, my closest friends are avionics dealers. Like, I tell everybody I don't have friends. Well, I do. I have great circle friends, and I get to see you and Holland and everybody every 3 months at a convention. But to really help avionics dealers, I'm now giving out free getting started videos on Garmin GTNs and the 175, 355, 375 series, and the Avidyne IFDs and the Genesis autopilots. So dealers are able to get a stack of cards where when people first get a quote, they can get the basic training they need to be really safe when they pick up their airplane that's all new stuff.
Yeah.
And it's actually saving the dealers a lot of time and money because they're getting a lot less phone calls about their autopilot being broken. When it actually is working, they're pushing the wrong buttons. So, no, it helps
broke, you
them
just
and
don't
me.
know how to operate it, dummy.
Yeah, it's not like, the early days when we were flying where the only thing we could mess up was an audio panel, but every ILS worked like an ILS. It's not that way. There have actually been several fatal NTSB FAA incident reports where they are now specifically mentioning there is no documented proof of recent training on new avionics. Great pilot needs a little help sometimes.
Yeah. So there have been some high-profile accidents of late. There's one recently with a young lady who obviously didn't understand her autopilot, so forth and so on, and that one was a tragedy, and there's others that come up, and there's just no excuse in the world for not getting up to date, not training, and not gaining a certain level of competence before going airborne.
Well, the problem is other pilots. So I'm on Facebook because I'm forced to be. And I see repeatedly in Garmin avionics user groups and in ForeFlight user groups and Avidyne and Genesis user groups that somebody will like upgrade to a new GTN 750, which the 750XI is the most beautiful thing on the planet. And everyone will say, well, you don't need training. You can download, and remember, people on Facebook are experts and they're always right. They go, oh, you don't need training. It's intuitive.
Do not get me started on that one.
And you can just download the iPad simulator and play with it. Well, you should download their iPad simulator and play with it. You should go up with a local CFI, not an expert. They think they're good, and they are the basics, because that's how you learn the basics. But you'll never learn why it went wrong or how to react in an emergency. And so our own team is telling our own team, you don't need training. And unfortunately, people believe it.
Ouch.
But, Facebook people are always right.
Yeah, the problem is the web is a double-edged sword. Some really good people are doing some great work on there, but there's a lot more people doing what they think is great work or they hope is great work and is not great work, or just totally diluted anyway, and they're doing a lot of damage to the industry, and it's hard to counter that.
There are some really popular YouTube channels from certified flight instructors that are very popular, and they're the nicest people on the planet. And I look at some of the stuff they teach, and I'm like,
no,
it's not just wrong, that's unsafe, because they don't have the real world experience that old people like me have. And they got taught it by somebody, and we tend to pass down these problems because you can only teach what you learn. So,
have you considered targeting some of the most misunderstood aspects of not just the gear but the procedures?
Yeah, especially for CFIs.
Yeah.
So, my single pilot IFR pro tips book. Yay!
Yeah. Quick, promo the book.
5,000 people have bought copies in the first 2 years.
It's a good run.
My new book was 5,000 copies in 3 weeks.
Oh, there you go.
Because I pay a lot of my own money every year to print them for free, and they are free to any future or current ground or flight instructor in the US. And it actually started with a grant from Avemco. Avemco's always supported me. And they go, we'd like you to help more CFIs. I'm like, absolutely. So Avemco asked me to provide a free video to help CFIs with common misunderstandings. I went, yeah, oh wait, that's not enough. So now we have 6 videos. Mm-hmm. And the best thing about the book, and the reason I am totally willing to pay $50,000 a year and pay for and print these books and give them out for free, is I don't write them. It's not a Gary CFI Pro Tips book. It's CFI Pro Tips from the very best instructors in the country. Everybody John Niehaus, Karen Kalashak, David, it's like the best instructors in the country are submitting their tips and stories. But the best tip in the whole book came from a 45-hour private pilot that never wants to be an instructor. And it's the best tip in the book. I loved my instructor, and my instructor was brilliant. But I had a problem with them. They were so smart, and they had so much information to share, they never shut up. I constantly missed radio calls because I couldn't hear the radio, and I never was asked if I had a question. And I'm like, oh my God, he means me. Mm-hmm. And then I looked at the name, I'm like, no, I never trained him.
Yeah.
But I'm the supposed master instructor, national instructor of the year, and I wonder how much I talk. Holland's laughing because she knows I'm very quiet and shy. I wonder if I have been talking too much where they didn't get to absorb it all, and it changed the way I started teaching.
The psychology of teaching is a whole science in and of itself.
And everything's free on my website, PilotSafety.org, and click on CFI Pro Tips, and it's all free, paid for by Avemco, and I kick in a little bit too.
There you go.
So, and it gets promoted by you,
Well,
that's how people learn about it.
We're trying to promote the industry and its safety and the things that people are doing that are right, and obviously you're one of them. What are you learning for projects like this? There's got to be an interesting kind of feedback that occurs when you're putting yourself out on the leading edge of instructing these particular protocols, and some of the data coming back has to be stunning.
You know, it really is. Everyone goes, Gary, what do you do for fun? And I go, well, I travel around the country doing 3-day trainings for people with new avionics, and I speak at conventions. And they're like, what do you do for fun? I go, well, that's what I do. I'm on the road 250 nights a year. And they go, well, don't you have a hobby? And I go, well, I read NTSB serious injury and fatal accident reports.
Ouch.
Well, because if I can learn how to prevent them, right?
Yeah.
And you know what I've seen, and I actually have the data of, it's a building trend where the NTSB and the FAA are now actually putting in the reports. This guy got a brand new panel from brand X, but there was no documented training on the new avionics in his logbook. They're actually looking for training and starting to recognize that training on new stuff is a thing. So I think the FAA is going to lead the way, especially the FAA safety team, which I'm happy to be part of. I think they're going to lead the way in helping people realize that training is important. I think you're always safer with an autopilot than hand flying. And I kind of have a fun way to prove that. Do you have a dog?
I certainly do.
Okay.
A real character, too.
And how many times, Jim, does Masuko find you outside in your underwear at 3 a.m. barking to keep the cats out of your yard?
So far, none, thank God.
Why would you stand outside in your underwear at 3 a.m. and bark at the cats if you bought a dog? Because barking at the cats is the easy thing. You can do the big picture and keep the house safe. People react strongly to this. I'm telling you, in my personal opinion, nobody should ever be hand flying a plane when the autopilot can do that simple stuff, and you can look at the engine and look at weather 200 miles out.
I always taught the autopilot as a time management device.
And it reduces workload. Now, all that being said, obviously I love GPS. Obviously I love autopilots. Do me a favor, everybody, once a month, file a flight plan to a VOR, fly a Victor Airways segment to another VOR, and do a circling VOR approach.
Oh boy.
Circle to land, publish missed, and do not put the flight plan in your beautiful Garmin or Avidyne avionics. Do not turn on your iPad. Take a safety pilot, and you are not allowed to use the autopilot. If once a month everybody hand flew old style with a timer, then they're really good at automation because they can fly without it too. So,
cool.
Or bark at cats for yourself. Either way.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to avoid that part. We'll see. Although my dog does a pretty good job of that. We'll see. So what's next for you? What big projects are in your future?
Well, I'm just so honored that the people even call me. I get to go train the Houston Police Department in 3 days. They bought a Gips Aerovan.
Oh, that's a fun ride.
Oh, yeah. And it's got this amazing all Garmin panel. And I'm like, okay, so, what are you doing with it? I expect, speed trap monitor. Nope. We do very intricate surveillance, and they do active drug interdiction, where they're, going after the people, and they go, we don't have to fly a plane. Our rotor people don't have to fly. But we want to be great in high-stress situations at using all the capabilities of this Garmin panel that they got. And Garmin's amazing, especially if you know it to a mastery level, because when you're chasing bad guys at night in marginal VMC, having those tools in the training really works. Yeah.
You've got to have the basics down, because when you start complicating it with extraneous tasks, that's when things get a little weird. Actually, I have some experience many, many, many years ago flying for ATF.
Okay.
And, everything from all the way through the night in a 172 at a very low power setting, following this car, doing this, doing that, and just thinking of what I have to manage while we're also managing the surveillance. Not easy.
When you're listening, it's not 2 radios that law enforcement listens to or fire. Yeah. They've got 6 radios going on, and working a GPS, and looking outside, and working infrared set. It's a lot. So the very best pilots work military, fire, law enforcement, and they have all the tools, but they need help in the easiest ways to use them that doesn't distract. And that's what I'm so happy to do.
There you go. Well, Gary, where can people get more information on what you're doing?
Honest to goodness, if you Google Gary, guy in the pink shirt, I'm not hard to find. But it's PilotSafety.org, and there's free getting started videos on Garmin and Avidyne and S-Tech stuff. Obviously paid mastery level videos on all of the GPS lines. And you know the reason I created those $200 6-hour video series is everybody wants to do a 3-day with me, but they can't take 3 days off work or they can't get on my calendar. So everybody can get a lot of what I teach in a video format, and books and articles and all this free stuff. And the best thing about it is I would love to hear from people that not only agree with me, it's always nice to hear I'm wonderful. If you disagree with anything I say, I would love to hear
Well, that's where you
why.
learn. That's where you learn.
Because I gotta tell you, I've been so adamant about something for several years, and then somebody goes, well, I think you're wrong because this. And I go, you're right, and I change the way I teach. And even if we don't agree, there's gonna be benefits to having both sides. So I would love that if people would reach out.
Well, I'll tell you what, as a flight instructor for many years, I've always learned more from my students than I thought I was ever going to be able to teach. And I was never a better pilot than when I was teaching.
Yeah, I owned a company. I was fine. Teaching was a hobby. And then it became an addiction. And 22 years later, I've got a wall full of articles, and I get to hang out with you and get these weird reward plaques. You know, when I won the National Instructor of the Year, I honestly think nobody else was nominated that year. I think I got it by default. But
no, I know that's not true.
I am really an amazing safe pilot because of everything my students have taught me.
There you go.
If they ask you a question you don't know and you have to go Google it, it really makes you better.
There you go.
I'm very lucky.
Gary, we appreciate you spending time with us here on
Anytime,
Aero-News
brother.
and at the AEA live sessions that we've been producing all this week.
Aero-News Network's coverage of the 67th Annual AEA International Convention and Trade Show, live from Grapevine, Texas, is brought to you in part by the following sponsors.
Working with GoGo has been very easy.
Great partnership, growth, it's been great.
Reliable network and a reliable system to install.
The upgrade, 100% worth it.